Hey guys, welcome back to Tennis 360, the podcast where we talk about all things tennis. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And Stefanos Tsitsipas has won the Monte Carlo Open for the third time in 4 years, which is a great kind of dominance over the last 5 years at this tournament for a player that hasn't even won a slam yet. And he's performed exceptionally well. It seems like this is his home. And that was a great kind of performance in the final against Ruud as well in that final. What do you think of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly inserting his name early in the conversation when it comes to contenders for the clay court season. I don't think a lot of us had him as a contender as we finished up Miami. A couple of kind of painful losses at Indian Wells and Miami, just not looking like his performances were that of a top 10 level player. Of course, he fell outside of the top 10 as well. And a lot of question marks over his season, really, and what he might be able to produce. And it's certainly a tournament that he loves, but he played some fantastic tennis over the course of the week. I think surprised a lot of people with especially his second serve execution throughout the week. Forehand was looking great, was running around the backhand very effectively. His weaknesses were certainly neutralized. So great to see another name a part of the conversation when it comes to, clay court season contenders. And congrats to him for kind of, coming back and proving his worth after what's been a difficult start to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the movement that he was shown on the clay was really impressive this time around. And that final, I will say, despite Steph playing very well, it was a bit of a disappointing performance there from Ruud. Yeah. 6 big finals now, hasn't been able to put away in any of those finals. I felt like, in the first set, I felt like he was just overhitting that forehand way too much. Was Casper, just a lot of unforced errors. In the second set, he played it so safe. And he was returning from way behind the baseline. He barely was ever moving in to hurt Steph whatsoever. And I don't know. I feel like at this point, it is a bit disappointing to see for Casper. Of course, though, he had a great win against Novak in the semis. And that's where he's really struggled against those, against Novak. He hadn't even won a set against Djokovic. So it is disappointing again from Casper. He only made 36% of his second serve returns in the court in that final, which is not a great stat for Casper. And I just wish that, he could find more ways to hurt Steph, and that it was just, it was a bit disappointing from him, in my opinion.
I agree. I thought the final level from both of them wasn't as good as what they had shown the rest of the week, but I also thought that Tsitsipas approached this match strategically very, very well. You could see that particularly in that second serve percentage. He was winning more points behind the second serve than he was behind the first serve. And I think part of the reason for that, where he was quite clever, is I think a lot of players with Ruud tried to hit their second serve into the Ruud backhand to try to draw the error, obviously that being Ruud's weaker shot, especially on clay. But Tsitsipas was mixing it up well enough and not letting Ruud kind of get the runaround forehand on the second serve return, which is, if you're predictably hitting it to Ruud's backhand on a second serve, Ruud kind of gets into this rhythm where he's going to look to run around and hit you with the forehand return. And Tsitsipas was mixing it up well enough on that second serve to keep Ruud guessing. So he just really couldn't penetrate and do much behind the second serve at all, which was definitely keeping him at bay. And then when we look back at the breakpoint opportunities that he had in the match, he did not execute and play well behind those points either. And as you say, I think it starts to raise some question marks over Ruud's performances in these high pressure finals and high pressure moments. Just decision making and ability to execute, especially on the forehand side, across multiple finals has looked weaker than the performances he's put in order to get to the final. And this was a fantastic opportunity for him to get a Masters 1000 win under his belt, and he came out looking nervous from the get-go. So definitely kind of question marks there for him in terms of what is it going to take for him to get over that hurdle and get to the next step. He certainly has the ability to win a clay court title, and I'm sure he's hungry to win one of the bigger ones, Masters 1000 this year. But just proving he doesn't quite have the mental resilience or the mettle to get it done, and just couldn't execute well enough.
Yeah, unfortunately so. And it's disappointing because I felt like in his matches against Hugo and Bear in the quarterfinals and in his semifinal against Novak Djokovic, he was against Djokovic as well. His forehand was really big. It was about as good of a weapon as we'd seen from Ruud, and he was just using it all over the court. I mean, on clay, he has so much time to, like you said, be able to run around his back and hit that forehand, use that as a weapon. And he was doing that against Steph. It felt like Steph played a very smart match, and Ruud, I think, is known for his kind of tennis IQ and his anticipation, two things that I think are very good on clay, where you have to kind of grind out the rallies and do the best at finding the angles and opening up the court and all these kind of things. But in the final, I think the nerves of Ruud, it really didn't feel like he ever really showed up on the court, if not for the very end of the match. It felt like he was just not there for the match. And yeah, I think that there's just something about, you know, Casper's performance in the quarterfinals and semifinals of big events compared to the final that I think is just so interesting in bringing out why tennis is so mental, and why you have to, like, you know, it accentuates the fact that tennis is such a mental sport that if you are nervous, it's going to play a big part. And I think that Casper said that he believed in himself to beat Novak from the start in that semi, which was a big key for him to win that match. And yeah, in that final, unfortunately, it just wasn't there for him. Like you said, the mental resilience, not there. We'll see if he can find it in one of the clay court tournaments to come. But yeah, that being said, hats off to Steph, who he looked phenomenal this week. He was the best player at Monte Carlo. He was the best player in Monaco. He was playing incredible. I would also, like to just say to that match against Sinner in the semis as well. Steph was playing incredible too. And the forehands from Steph the whole week, the angles that he was finding throughout all of the court. That being said, in that match, there was a controversy with a line call, and a lot of people are talking about. A lot of people are saying that there should be another winner of the tournament, and other huge kind of allegations like that, to say that there should, that Sinner was robbed and all of this. Curious to see where you stand. I do think that objectively it should have been Sinner up 4-1, a double break point, because the ball was out. Doesn't matter even that it was 7 centimeters out. The ball was out. And I think it's true that Jannik could have challenged, but it's also a split-second decision. It's not his job. It is the umpire and the line judge who was there to call it. So it was unfortunate to get a situation like that. But yeah, at the same time, I guess that these kind of things happen. I'm excited for next year when we don't even have to worry about it, and that technology has its ways. But yeah, I definitely felt like it was an unfortunate situation for Jannik.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit more than unfortunate. I mean, these calls are vital and can, as we can see, can impact the outcome of a match. And certainly a 4-1 deficit in the third set is much more difficult to overturn than just a one-break deficit. And there's no telling, the what if question. What if they had gotten the call right? But one just kind of has to wonder, like, what happened? Like, how can you see it so wrong? I think it's one thing when one accepts, okay, it kind of was in the margin of error and it was close and, tough, versus that ball was so blatantly out and nobody did anything about it. It's just, it's hard to accept. It's a tough pill to swallow. And I just don't think it's like really on Sinner in this situation to be the one to bring it up and challenge it. I feel like the officiating should just be better. And it wasn't just this call in this match. There were a number of calls this week that were not good enough. Medvedev had a couple of them in his first two matches, and it's beyond frustrating, especially when we know that the technology exists to avoid having these types of situations. Of course, officiating and umpires in any sport can impact the outcome, and it happens a lot across our sports. But one hopes that one deploys all the technology possible, and that the officials are paying enough attention to make sure that these types of mistakes don't happen, but of course they do happen, and that's part of sport. So I think there's no point in speculating on, should there have been a different winner of this tournament. What's done is done. I do think Gil Gross raised an interesting argument in his previous podcast. I think it was last week, where once we have Hawkeye, who's to say that the players might look at the mark and say, well, look, it's out, but Hawkeye's saying it's in. Look, it's, and like that, we're still going to have these types of disagreements and arguments when it comes to play. And that's the difficulty of this technology in general. But I think for the most part, players would agree, like, this technology exists. Why are we waiting until 2025 to use it when we've been using it everywhere else? Especially when it comes to these types of calls where it's literally outside the margin of error, and so there really is no debate about that. So for me, it's like there's nothing fun about the umpires coming down and checking a mark. I know I made a video about this last year of the French Open, sort of said it was a part of the mise en scène, like part of the kind of romanticism of playing on clay. To me, there is nothing fun and enjoyable about this. It's really aggravating as a spectator, as a fan, and it's aggravating for the players, and it just creates aggro and controversy, and moments that players aren't proud of. I'm sure Medvedev wasn't happy with all of his viral clips of him freaking out over the past, week or so. So I just think one just has to question, like, just why aren't the tournaments making better decisions, despite whatever the ATP regulation is? We know that there's Hawkeye in Madrid, for example, so there are clay court tournaments that do use it. So why are we kind of stuck living in the past? But, as I said, what's done is done, and Tsitsipas made the most of the situation, and Sinner still had the chance to win that point. So one has to accept it and move on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, there are other places to get drama and excitement rather than, was that ball in or was that ball out? Like, that's not the place for drama and excitement.
Yeah.
In the sport, I think. And yeah, I guess you just kind of have to accept the situation at this point. But it is weird with social media where these clips are so, able to be passed around. We can see the Hawkeye mark just being shown to us on TV, and yet it's not being shown to them on court. It's like, hey, can I just pull up this tweet to you real quick? Can I walk on court and show you this tweet, of this photo of the call? And it's like, why do we have the access the players don't? It's very weird, and I think that, at this point you have to accept it. But I would agree that, I mean, there shouldn't be a situation where this is happening when we have other resources to stop it. And it's just unfortunate all around. I would agree that I'm not going to say Tsitsipas is an asterisk winner whatsoever. It's just an unfortunate situation. That's sports. That's what happens. The problem is, hey, we can stop this from happening, and let's go about doing that rather than, letting useless drama be useless drama that really deters from the sport rather than adds to it, which is sometimes the opposite of the feeling you would get if you look at, any kind of tennis TV compilation of dramatic moments. Hey, no, it's actually deterring from the sport when we're not, the balls are actually being called out when they're actually in, and the rules aren't really being followed. Hey, we have ways against this, so let's use them and get the drama from the sport being played in a fair and correct way.
And I think you make a good point that it also just makes for a strange TV viewing experience. The fact that we are getting that technology as the fans and the spectators, but the players themselves aren't getting it. I think it was like, I'm a soccer fan, and before we had goal line technology, like all the different camera angles would try and, figure out, was it a ball in or was it not? Did it cross the line? Did it not? But it was still speculation because you were kind of using camera angles to look at things. It wasn't until as a fan, when goal line technology came into place in the actual game, that we were also able to see that on the TV. So it's definitely a weird experience, especially also given that we use Hawkeye at some tournaments and not other tournaments, that it's very confusing for fans. And it creates all of this drama and online debate and criticism about tennis in general and about your tournament and about clay. So I don't know, for me, if I was a tournament organizer, part of my decision-making would be like, hey, this is available to the fans in the TV viewing experience. I don't want to look like a fool when inevitably some calls get wrong, and that's what's going to be, talked about online about my tournament versus the quality of the play and everything else going on. And again, like ultimately Sinner was a breakup. He was still in a winning position. Like he still could have taken care of this match and won, but it overshadowed that result. And unfortunately, it's also overshadowing the result of the final when it should be a different focus of conversation. And so I just think it's these types of decisions that are not well thought through and synchronized when it comes to tournaments looking at their total experience for fans who are in attendance and fans who are watching through different media outlets. And I would want more synergy between the two to make that a more cohesive experience. But it is what it is, and we'll get it next year. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and I agree. Yeah, well, and then, there's some other really good matches this week, like Rune versus Dimitrov. I thought was an incredible match. Rune showing a good comeback spirit with that one, also saving he saved 2 match points there. He also saved 2 match points against Jannik in their match, but Jannik obviously coming out the victor in their match.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think of Rune with his style of play this year. Seems so different on the clay than it was last year. I feel like last year his success on the clay was coming from his ability to be very defensive, move well, look for opening moments to attack. But I don't feel like he was doing what he's doing this year, which is like extreme hugging the baseline, refusing to back up, looking for big power shots, big kill moments early in rallies. I mean, some of them, the match points that he saved against Sinner were like, holy crap, what great offense. But then there were also moments in that match where some of his forehands were like hitting the back fence, and you were just sort of like, why are you doing that? And I think some of the conversation about Rune over the last 18 months has been this player needs to have better decision-making in terms of his shot selection. And that's also, of course, been the conversation for Alcaraz and Sinner over the past couple of years. And Sinner's really kind of been the one to show his maturity in that way and his improvement in the shot selection ability. And it just feels like Sinner's coming out with a completely different strategy and tactic on the clay than what worked for him last year. And I'm kind of confused as to why he feels like he has to do that. I don't know whether that's, maybe some conditioning differences. He looked kind of gassed at some points. Obviously, he had difficult scheduling this week. He had that, that Dimitrov match. He played over 5 hours of tennis that day. So perhaps he was looking for ways to shorten the point. But I just feel like I was surprised to see such a strategic change from him.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I agree. It was obvious if you're watching the match that he was just standing on that baseline and going for, just whether it was going to be a winner or an error. He was going for the shot. And I think that honestly, to me, it came down to the fact that I don't know how good Rune is at the moment at switching strategy mid-match and like figuring out, shot selection and kind of the strategic part of things at the moment. I think what my guess is, I can only guess, but what my guess is that he came into the Jannik matchup after losing at the ATP finals thinking, okay, if I'm going to beat Jannik at the moment, I have to play aggressive and take that away from Jannik. And I just think that he didn't back down from that because both of them were playing at a high level. But that being said, you only had to wonder, hey, if Rune just kind of played like he did last year, where he was, rallying with the ball and playing not passively, but in a way where he wasn't just smacking a forehand every shot, would he be able to actually grab success like he did when he beat Sinner 7-5 in the third set last year? And I think it's the fact that I think he feels like maybe he needs to be as aggressive as Alcaraz and Sinner are. Maybe he feels like he can't play the way that he plays and still be able to beat those two guys. Feels like he's lagging behind those two and thinks that he needs to be as aggressive as them. And I think that he needs to get more confidence in his own game and see that, hey, Sinner might power through him once in a while, but that doesn't mean that he can't win the match. And, there were stats like Rune came into net 29 times. He actually had great success. He won 21 of those 29 times. He also had 23 unforced errors to just 11 from Jannik. So the numbers back us both up. He was playing much more aggressive. But I don't know exactly why he was doing that, but my guess is that he wanted to impose an aggressive strategy to stop Sinner from being aggressive. And I just think that he needs to learn from this and say, hey, maybe that's not going to work either, but hey, maybe I can play my own game and just get the most out of that, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, I think, is finding confidence in your own game.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I feel like we kind of saw the aggressive strategy all week from him, to be honest. I don't feel like he showed us what he did last year at Monte Carlo, obviously getting to the final and losing to Rublev in the end. But he was really onto something, I feel like, last year with his clay court approach. I'm curious to see how he's going to go about the kind of upcoming tournaments. And in that Dimitrov match, he seemed to kind of have an abdominal issue. Of course, he's still working his way back from last year when he had a back issue. Who knows, kind of what might be behind the intentional, like trying to shorten the point and not wanting to kind of hang in there in ways that he was doing successfully last year. But I hope to see elements of that again, because I feel like that really made him a contender in the clay court swing last year and have a couple good runs. So curious to see how he's going to kind of go about his approach. But overall, a good showing from him this week, and shows that he's still a dangerous young guy on clay.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, Tsitsipas winning this week. Do you think that he's a contender for, Roland Garros? And how do you think the conversation shifts around Tsitsipas now that he's in this kind of, he's back with the form that can win Masters titles? Do you think that this is the kind of Tsitsipas that can get to the final again and push Novak Djokovic, go up 2-0? He didn't win in 2022, but he still was performing very well. Yeah, very similar to this week, how he's playing the whole cat and mouse, hitting angles all over the court and serving in a very, aggressive and confident way. Do you think that he can be a big contender at Roland Garros? Maybe now that Novak is going to be 37 years old and maybe not in as good of a form as he's been the last couple of years, and that maybe before Alcaraz has quite reached the peak that he has, and maybe before Sinner has quite figured out the clay courts, maybe is this the period for Tsitsipas to really pull up and do something in the clay swing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's certainly a really good opportunity for him, especially given that Alcaraz is also pulled out of Barcelona this week with the continued arm pain. I do think I'm a one step at a time type of girl at this point in the season. He's shown us one good week at a place where he's won twice before. I do think sometimes players, kind of like Felix Auger-Aliassime has had moments like this too, where he randomly shows up for a week at a tournament that he's played at well before because he has confidence there and because he's won it. And given the succession, that he won it twice in a row, I feel like there's just like kind of a level of confidence that some players get in some locations. Some tournaments just treat them well, feel good. You never know what happens behind the scenes at those tournaments too, what conditions they're in that create, a good week for them. I do think Steph will want to really push over the next couple of weeks to get up those the ranking ladder a little bit more. I think he sits 9th now. That's still not quite where you would want to be in order to get a favorable draw for Roland Garros. I think if he could get inside the top 6, try to limit, having a difficult quarter, semi, and final situation, I think we might really consider him as a contender for Roland Garros. I think right now, sitting in 9th or 10th, he's still going to have a couple of difficult matches to get through there before he gets to the final. So still question marks for me, but certainly has reinserted himself into the conversation when I wasn't really sure what to consider in terms of his ability this clay court season. And he reminds us again how good he is on clay and how good of an athlete and good of a mover he is. So I am not in a position yet where I feel confident to say that he would be my top pick to win Roland Garros. But, outside of our bigger names that we've been discussing this year, I think he would be an outside contender at this stage. Certainly if he could win another title in Barcelona, Rome, or Madrid, then we might be switching up this conversation and favoring him even more.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair, especially see with the success he's had at Monte Carlo whenever he's come up to play at Monaco. And Yeah, I think Roland Garros, he seems to have great success there every year, so we'll see. I think the big thing would be see if he can pick up some momentum at Madrid and Rome, and I think he's going to have the motivation. I think he's going to have strong motivation to get his first slam, so we'll see how he does, but I kind of would tend to agree with you that the that I'm gonna slow down a little bit until we see the result, not just at one tournament but at two, because he lost 6-2, 6-4 in two matches at Miami and Indian Wells to players that were both outside the top 20 in the world. So I'm just gonna slow down. But that being said, Steph being as good as he is on clay specifically, and now they started the clay season off so strong, makes it a little different, but not different enough for me to be like, oh, he's gonna win Roland Garros, especially because it looks like Rafa might play. So you might. We'll
And
see.
a quick word on Djokovic as well. I don't think we saw his best
Sure.
level yet this week. I think he, in the past, has used Monte Carlo maybe as a means to play himself into form at the start of the clay court season. It's probably one of his least successful Masters in terms of number of times he's won it. Yeah. And it kind of looks similar again, like he was kind of playing himself into form. We see time and time again in this tournament with, kind of clips of him like gasping for air and like looking like he's, dying in between points at moments this week. Some flashes of brilliance, some flashes of what Djokovic can do. But I thought in particular that match against De Minaur was pretty hard viewing, pretty poor standard of tennis, honestly, from both players. And also kind of question marks for me against Ruud in that third set. He got the break back and then all of a sudden got broken to love. And then double faulted on match point. Things that we're not quite used to seeing from Djokovic. And it's just sort of like, where are you at, both mentally and fitness-wise? I do think he'll play himself into a position to certainly cover the fitness portion when it comes to Roland Garros. And I think the motivation will be there for the slams. I don't think there's question marks about that. But I do kind of wonder whether maybe some of the fear factor for him in terms of how players see him is starting to wear off in terms of the brightness of that shine. Maybe it's a little bit more dull. Players like a Ruud might think, okay, I have a chance now. Like things might be, the pendulum might be swinging the other way. And I always feel like when you're in a situation where the fear factor goes down ever so slightly, if you're not able to, put your foot down and be like, no, I am here, and he's not able to do that in one of these upcoming tournaments, then I do think he goes in a little bit tarnished into Roland Garros in terms of that fear factor in particular.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think a lot of what Novak brings is the mental part of things, where I think people are genuinely scared to play him because they know the numbers and the game that he's consistently brought on the court, and the fact that he can take away their biggest dreams of consistency, and he has no problem doing that. I think that's what the GOATs do. Are like, move out of the way, I'm the greatest, and I think that's what Novak's been able to do. And now that is kind of lost to Nardi, Indian Wells, lost here to Casper, and the way that he lost that match. I would agree with you. And I think, obviously, clay is Djokovic's probably his worst surface. But that being said, still should be having great success on it, knowing that, the success he's had particularly at Rome and Roland Garros. Monte Carlo, not quite as much, but we'll see. We'll see how he comes around in Rome and Roland Garros. If he's not informed by Wimbledon, then I think that we have really gotten to a place where the guys are gonna stop looking at Djokovic in the same way, and I think the fans might start in that way, and that's when we might see a new era kind of approach. We also had Billie Jean King Cup this week with big wins for Great Britain over France. Some good wins for Raducanu and Bolter. Bolter kind of continuing on good form that she's found this year. Raducanu beating Diane Perry 4-6, 6-1, 7-6. And she also beat Caroline Garcia 3-6, 6-3, 6-2. Garcia is going to be disappointed, but it's good to see for Raducanu, who's obviously one of the better shot makers and one of the better kind of aggressive, fastball players that we've seen. And you hope that she can find some success, but it hasn't been there for her, but those are going to give her some confidence, which is good. Also, good win for Naomi Osaka, who's going to be playing this week. We'll get to that with the upcoming section in a little bit. Also, U.S. beat Belgium Pagol and Navarro beating some really good young Belgian players as well, who made some really tough matches for their rankings, but they got the win in the end. Swiatek played twice as well, the world number one, the number one woman to beat. She got the win for Team Poland. And then also Bogdan beats Svitolina for Romania. We'll see how Svitolina kind of comes back from that. And it kind of came down to a thrilling match tiebreaker. Romania takes it. Did you guys get a chance to see that one?
I didn't get to watch the doubles tiebreak, but some really good matches under the Billie Jean King Cup. This was qualifying for the final event that will be in Seville later this year. I want to emphasize that I thought Raducanu played impressively this week. Obviously, she skipped out on Miami with a back injury. And clay, hasn't been a surface that she has much experience on. Also, similarly for Bolter, it's kind of funny. If you look at Bolter's career, her clay court experience, given that she's 27, 28, is very limited. Like, she doesn't win matches on clay. So maybe she's making a change this year, but particularly Raducanu has very little experience on the clay. She talks about how it's a surface that she's still really learning how to play on, but she moved impressively well this weekend, beating Diane Perry and Garcia from a set down in France against, French players. I think, showed some of that match toughness, some of that mental resilience. I think she did great in a kind of team environment, supportive environment. I think it begs the question, when Raducanu has a consistent team setup and coaches and team around her that are working effectively, that she certainly is a name for the future, a contender, a player that, a lot of us who are fans of the WTA Tour can be really excited about. And when she's healthy, she's so much fun to watch. So I thought that this was a really good omen for her. And she'll take some confidence from this and some pride helping GB get to another Billie Jean King Cup final. And that'll be amongst the teams who have qualified will be USA, Australia, Poland, Japan, Germany, Slovakia, Romania, and Team GB. So it should make for an exciting final group, and certainly some really big names competing for these countries as well. So it's great for the Billie Jean King Cup, which has had kind of a limited radar over the years in terms of viewership.
Yeah, and I'd like to get the hype going for Billie Jean King Cup, which I think is a great event. I'd say the same thing for Davis Cup as well. I'd love to have that team atmosphere, which I think is so good. And I mean, you see it all the time in whether it's like soccer games or or anything. It's like, you like to have a home team cheering on for their country, and I think that adds something great in tennis as well. So yeah, I hope that brings on some hype. And then I guess we can kind of move on to the power ranking section as well. Yep. At the top of the power ranking, Sinner and Alcaraz remain on my side, but Tsitsipas fell in at the number 3 spot. For me, I've then got Dimitrov, then I've got Casper Ruud fell in. He got to the final as well. Tsitsipas and Ruud both weren't in the top 10. Like I said, both guys didn't really have, semifinal or final appearances at the Sunshine Double, but Ruud was really good despite the poor performance, especially out the return in the final. His forehand was still great. His backhand was definitely much better than it usually was as well, especially against Djokovic. It was a really, I thought, important tool for him against Djokovic, really being able to survive backhand to backhand, often hit some good backhand down the lines as well. Like early in the first set to kind of get a break as well. So that was good for Ruud. And then I've got Medvedev dropping down a little bit, but he's still one of the top guys. Then I've got Demonor. I've got Zverev dropping. And also I've got Rune and Hurkacz. Who do you have for your top 10?
Wow, I'm surprised you don't have Djokovic in your top 10. That's
oh my god,
cool.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, Djokovic.
Wow.
No offense to Hurkacz, he might have to drop that. That's how much I favor Hubie. Hubie is quite the player. Have you seen Hubie serve? Telling me
well, he did get a first play court title, so I can't blame you for giving him a nod. Exactly. But yeah, so I think for me, much of my top 3 is unchanged. For me, I still think Sinner played some great tennis this week, and Alcaraz, disappointing to see him withdraw from Barcelona as well. Obviously, some question marks there. I think if he withdraws from Madrid, then we're going to have to start thinking about my power rankings if he really stays there, because there'll be some serious question marks. Medvedev, I think, again, played some good tennis, let some outside, things kind of distract him this week, but still a contender on clay for me. Djokovic moves into my 4th spot now that he's back competing again, and Tsitsipas takes the 5th spot. I still give Djokovic the nod just experience-wise at this point in the season, but let's see how that goes. Ruud moves up a spot, switching with de Minaur. De Minaur had a really ugly showing against Djokovic this week, so he gets dinged for me. Zverev expected a better week from him as well. In Monte Carlo, didn't quite bring the same level that he had in Miami. Difficult to transition, but would have liked to see a little bit of a better performance this week. Dimitrov fell a couple spots for me just because other folks were in the way, but certainly played some good tennis. Rune really pushed him, which is why I put Rune into my 10th spot, and that levels out my power rankings for the top 10.
Yeah, I think we've got pretty similar picks there. And on the WTA, I've got I didn't have any shifts, but I saw that you shifted some of your players around. I think I'll have more shifts as there are kind of more tournaments going on this week. But if you want to talk about your shifts that you had due to Billie Jean King
Cup. The top 4 are all competing this week, so they kind of remain unchanged for me, and I'm excited to see how they're gonna shake things up this week or not. Collins moves up to my 5th spot. She won't be competing in Stuttgart, but certainly gets the nod based off of Miami and Charleston back-to-back titles. Sakari also not competing this week, but looking strong in Charleston on the clay, and I think she, clay is her favorite surface, so I expect her to have a decent season here, given that she sort of played herself into form from Indian Wells onwards. Azarenka's had a couple of good weeks on tour, played well in Miami, played well in Charleston. Ostapenko is a part of the mix this week. Obviously, she's a former Grand Slam champion at Roland Garros, so the clay is a good surface for her. Not seen much success clay court title wise post that Grand Slam, but when she plays big tennis, can certainly be a contender. And at Stuttgart, which is a faster playing clay court, she can be dangerous. Pegula is unchanged for me. She had a really good run in Charleston, and then I am giving the nod to Raducanu, who will also be competing this week. So let's see how she does.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Ostapenko kind of lost her form a little bit, but she was in really good form to start the year. So I'm really curious to see how she looks on the clay courts as well. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. And then once we get to the upcoming section, which is kind of like always when we talk about different tournaments coming up very soon. This week we've got Stuttgart, which is an indoor 500 tournament. We've got Swiatek playing, who's a 2 times defending champion. She beat Sabalenka in the final last year. That was straight sets right before they had that great kind of epic final in Madrid. And all top 4 players competing. It's going to be a really good event for WTA. Krajicova is also back in action after a little bit of illness that she was dealing with. Some interesting first rounds: Raducanu versus Angelique Kerber, Noskova versus Ostapenko, and Badoza versus Sabalenka is a potential second round as well. So, that could be really interesting. I think Sabalenka and Badoza are good friends as well, so that can make that interesting. And Raducanu versus Kerber as a young player taking on bit of a more of a vet who's been around the game, and that could definitely be a really interesting clash of styles as well, especially knowing that Raducanu has been in good form. So we're gonna see how that shapes out. Also, Noskova and Ostapenko, both women who can absolutely slap the hell out of the ball. So
it should be fun. Yeah.
And then ATP this week, Barcelona is a 500 tournament. Rafa is back. We were worried, and Nadal is back in action to play. He's going to play against Caboli in his first match back, and I am very excited to see Rafa back on the clay. First time since 2022 Roland Garros, where he beat Ruud in straight sets, a 6-0 in the third set. 12-time champion of this event, and we're going to see how Rafa does. Sadly, Alcaraz is out, so one Spaniard in, one Spaniard out. Hope that Alcaraz comes back from Madrid, like we were saying earlier. But also, that's not great news. Also, Kazao had a bad ankle injury that happened as well. Other players competing: Tsitsipas, Ruud, Rublev, Karin Khachanov, Umber, Fils, Alex de Minaur. Those players are all competing, so it's a very full tournament as well, despite Alcaraz sadly being out. But Rafa is the name that everybody's going to be looking at. He could play de Minaur in the second round. Do you have thoughts on Rafa, and what do you think is the biggest kind of what should be the biggest kind of storyline or thought in the zeitgeist that people have around this kind of Rafa comeback? Should we be hoping for a Barcelona title, or what should we be just happy to see him play? Should we expect a Barcelona title? What's your thoughts on this Rafa's comeback above anything?
Yeah, my feeling is just let him play. I don't think he's coming into this tournament with an expectation to win it. I think he's trying to kind of test his body, maybe see where things are at. In a 500 kind of setting, I think Madrid and Rome are 2-week Masters tournaments or 10-day Masters tournaments. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him play both, if not either of those, maybe just one. I think this is a good opportunity for him to play in front of a home crowd, say goodbye to the Spanish crowd. So I think that's a motivating factor for him. I honestly wouldn't be surprised even if he gets a first round win, if we see a withdrawal from him. I think he's going to do everything he can to avoid aggravating anything before Roland Garros. It's certainly going to be the biggest, motivating factor for him. So I think here it's the motivation is home crowd. Get a match or two under the belt, see how the body is feeling, give it a test, but not push it too far. I really don't think he's going to play more than 2 rounds at this stage, just because there's not been much tennis going on, and he pulled out the week prior in Monte Carlo, saying his body just couldn't do it. So I think we'll see a good level from him. I think he always puts himself in a position to play good tennis when he is competing. So I think there is potentially things to get excited about, but I would just say, hold your horses from the fans' perspective. Enjoy seeing him play, and go in with limited expectations, in the sense that his eye is going to be on the French Open, and anything that might come up at this stage, he's going to protect himself. So I think this is really just a goodbye lap for his Spanish fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest story for me is, I'm happy to see him back on court, because it seemed at a point like it was last year, withdrawal after withdrawal after withdrawal. It's good to see him back, because I think a lot of people were worried that Brisbane, his first tournament back, was going to be his last tournament. But I will say that I think that if he does play, I think every match for me, like it was in Brisbane, I think he's gonna go full out with the. I think he's going to go full out with the body, to be honest. It would surprise me. It would surprise me a little bit if not, just because I don't think I've rarely seen a match from Rafa where, unless he's really physically hampered, like against Mackie McDonald at the Australian Open last year, where unless that's happening, I would be highly surprised if he doesn't. I would be highly surprised if he steps onto the court whatsoever, if he feels like he can't give 100% physically. That being said, if his body's in control and it's not him, then there's not much you can do about it. So we'll see.
I think the only place where you might notice that is on the serve, honestly, because that's where the abdominal injury is coming in at the moment. Okay. We kind of saw him doing that in the Netflix slam, where the serve just wasn't his 100% because he physically could not hit it 100%. I doubt that the serve, the ab, is going to be at 100%. Obviously, very few players are at 100% when they are coming into matches. So that doesn't mean that he can't be effective. But I think from a physicality perspective, of course, he's going to leave everything out on the court and at least try and win one match. But, I think in terms of expectations, to think that he could string together 4 matches in a week when he's not, been able to do that in over a year, I think, limited expectations on that front, and hopefully just really enjoy seeing a good 2 matches from him. I would expect de Minaur to come through, just because that's going to be such a tough match for Nadal if he can win that first match, as de Minaur is just such a runner, and he's gonna really push Nadal from a movement perspective. So let's see how it goes, but excited that he's a part of the mix. It's big that he is in the mix ahead of Roland Garros, and he deserves a chance to say goodbye to his home fans.
Yeah, for sure. I think the main thing is let's enjoy him play, and that's an interesting point about the serve. And I guess we'll see. We'll see if how close to 100% he can kind of give it. And then culture. There's a big thing going on with Swiatek, a company she signed for. If you want to kind of
Interesting note on Swiatek. She becomes the first ever athlete to be a Lancome ambassador. Lancome is a beauty and makeup brand. She's also, she's a woman of many firsts. First women's player to sign for On, of course. First ever global tennis player to partner with Visa. First ever female athlete to become an Infosys global ambassador. She also got that Lego brand deal earlier this year. I think it begs the question from a culture perspective, like, is she a bigger brand name than, what she gets credit for? I think a lot of people think of her as, a woman on top who's got no personality and is kind of boring. But when, I think at times that can be a little bit of an American perspective, because in Europe, especially in mainland Europe, brands are seeking opportunities to work with her. And she's also very intentional about the brands that she does work with in terms of what are they giving back to women? What are they giving back to the tennis community? And how is that fostering, a larger vision of change? She is very intentional about the brands that she will work with in a way that feels very humble, and it feels very real and authentic to Swiatek's personality. And I think it's nice to see her partner with a beauty and makeup brand. She's not really someone that we think of as like a style queen or, a beauty queen in that way, and has sometimes maybe been like unfairly questioned. I remember a couple of years ago when she won Roland Garros, a reporter asked her, like, do you wear makeup? And, I think in women's sport, like, that can be a difficult thing to get right and get a balance of. Like, are you a sexy women's player like a Sharapova, or, are you just the boring woman who doesn't wear any makeup and like doesn't, get dressed up, and that type of, balance can be hard to strike. So I think it's awesome to see somebody like her get a brand deal with Lancome, and also to go after her as their first ever female athlete. I think it does highlight the impact that Swiatek is having in women's tennis, and how brands really do love working with her from the sense of it's kind of a stamp of approval based on the value set that she seems to operate by. So great opportunity for her, and I think a great sign for women's tennis that these brands are continuing to get involved.
Yeah, for sure. I think that'll end off the podcast this week. I've been Anthony Hirsch.
I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like always. Please don't forget to like the video as well. And we'll see you guys next week for all stuff Barcelona, all things Stuttgart as well. See you guys then.